when NBA superstar Stephen Curry found himself at a McDonald's counter without his wallet. He couldn't have imagined what would happen next. A kind-hearted elderly homeless man stepped forward, offering the last bit of his money to pay for Curry's meal. What the man didn't realize was that he was helping not just one of basketball's greatest stars, but a humble celebrity who would ensure this generous gesture didn't go unnoticed. Downtown Oakland was scorching under the afternoon sun as Stephen Curry navigated his sleek white Tesla Model X through the weekend traffic. Beside him sat his wife Aisha, while their eldest daughter, Riley, was buckled up in the back seat. They were on their way to the local community sports center, where the Golden State Warriors often hosted casual games for fans and families. "Are you excited for the game today, Riley?" Steph asked, catching her eye through the rearview mirror. Riley nodded with enthusiasm. "Yeah. Will I get to play too, Dad?" Steph chuckled, his smile broadening. "Well, this one's more for fans and family to watch. But maybe after, we can shoot some hoops together." Aisha turned to Riley, adding, "Your dad's right, sweetie. These games are less intense, more about fun and spending time with everyone. It's a special chance to connect and just enjoy the day." Riley's eyes lit up. "Will there be other kids there too?" "Absolutely," Steph reassured her. "These events are all about families coming together. Speaking of which, how do you think Ryan and Cannon are doing with Aunt Zora?" "They're probably having a blast," Aisha chimed in, turning toward Riley. "You know how much Ryan loves being the big sister to Cannon. But why couldn't they come with us?" Riley's voice carried a hint of disappointment. "Well," Aisha explained gently, "Cannon's still little. These games can be long and tiring for him. But I'm sure Ryan is keeping him entertained at home." Steph nodded in agreement. "Exactly. And Aunt Zora's great with them. Don't worry, there'll be plenty of family outings once Cannon's a bit older." The conversation flowed as they continued their drive. They talked about Riley's upcoming school year, Aisha's latest culinary experiments, and Steph's training schedule. The atmosphere in the car was warm and filled with laughter. Suddenly, Riley piped up. "Dad, I'm hungry. Can we get something to eat before the game?" Steph glanced at the dashboard clock. They had some extra time, so a quick snack wouldn't hurt. "All right, but something light, okay? We don't want you feeling sluggish during the game." "Okay, Dad." Riley agreed enthusiastically. As if on cue, the familiar golden arches of McDonald's came into view. Steph pulled the Tesla smoothly into the drive-through lane, where a line of cars had already formed. The queue moved at a snail's pace, and Steph tapped his fingers rhythmically on the steering wheel, his eyes darting occasionally to the time display. "This might take longer than we thought," Aisha observed, sensing his growing impatience. "Yeah, I hope it doesn't make us late for the game," Steph replied, his brow creased slightly. As they waited, the family chatted about their week and reminisced about past outings. The slow line unexpectedly became a moment for quiet family bonding. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Steph noticed movement. An elderly homeless man was making his way between the cars, seeking donations. His weathered face spoke of struggles, but he carried himself with quiet dignity, his eyes a mix of hope and resignation. "Dad, Mom, look," Riley said, her voice tinged with concern. "That man looks like he needs help. Can we do something?" Steph and Aisha exchanged a glance, touched by their daughter's empathy. Aisha searched her purse, frowning. "I don't have any small bills," she said apologetically. Steph opened his wallet, realizing he'd only brought $20. "I didn't bring much cash either," he admitted. It was unusual for him, but for a casual community game it made sense. Aisha typically handled the money. As the man approached their car, Steph hesitated. He needed most of the money for Riley's meal, but couldn't ignore the pull to help. Before he could decide, Riley spoke up. "It's okay, Dad. We don't need much before the game anyway. We should help him." Steph felt a swell of pride at his daughter's selflessness. He rolled down the window and handed the man a $10 bill. The elderly man's eyes widened with gratitude, and he said softly, "Bless you, child." Without realizing the celebrity he was speaking to, the man shuffled away, disappearing around the corner. For a moment, silence filled the car. The family reflected on the simple but profound moment they had just shared. "That was really kind, Dad," Riley said softly. Steph smiled at her in the mirror. "Sometimes, Riley, even a small act of kindness can make a big difference in someone's day. We're lucky, and it's important to give back when we can." Aisha reached over and squeezed Steph's hand, her smile filled with pride. "Do you think he'll be okay, Dad?" Riley asked, still looking back to catch a glimpse of the man. "I hope so, sweetheart. We've done what we could for now," Steph replied gently. As the drive-through line crept forward, the initial frustration melted into a deeper sense of gratitude and reflection. While the Curry family waited, their conversation shifted back to the game, but the earlier act of kindness lingered, reminding them of the importance of compassion in even the smallest moments. Even Aisha's comforting touch couldn't completely ease the tension building in Steph's shoulders. "This is taking way too long," Steph muttered, his usually calm demeanor beginning to fray. "Are we going to miss the game, Dad?" Riley asked from the back seat, her voice tinged with worry. Steph turned to her with a reassuring smile. "No, sweetie, we won't miss it. We might be a little late, but that's okay. Sometimes things don't go as planned." Unable to sit idle any longer, Steph made a decision. He glanced at Aisha and Riley. "I'm going to see what's holding things up. Be right back." Unbuckling his seatbelt, he stepped out of the Tesla. His tall, athletic frame unfolded from the driver's seat as he strode toward the ordering system. The car ahead was still blocking access to the speaker, so he approached on foot. As Steph neared the speaker, he spotted movement, a McDonald's employee rushing toward him. The young worker, likely in his early 20s, looked flustered and slightly out of breath. "I'm so sorry, sir," the employee began, words tumbling out hurriedly. "We're going to have to close the drive-through. There's a car at the front of the line that broke down, and we can't move it." Steph's eyebrows shot up. "A broken-down car? How long has this been going on?" The employee shifted uncomfortably. "It just happened, but we can't move the car. We're asking everyone to back out so we can clear the lane. I'm really sorry for the inconvenience. If you'd like, you can park and come inside to order." Steph nodded, understanding but visibly frustrated by the lost time. He turned back to his car and slid into the driver's seat, where Aisha and Riley were waiting expectantly. "What's happening, honey?" Aisha asked. Steph sighed, running a hand through his hair. "There's a broken-down car at the front of the line. They're shutting the drive-through and asking everyone to back out." Riley, showing wisdom beyond her years, spoke up. "Maybe we should skip getting food so we're not late for the game?" Steph considered her suggestion for a moment, but then shook his head. "We've already waited this long. Let's park and go inside instead. It should be quick." Carefully, he reversed the Tesla out of the drive-through lane, maneuvering with precision to make space for the cars ahead to do the same. Once clear, he steered the car into a parking spot, bringing the sleek vehicle to a stop under the bright afternoon sun. As they prepared to head inside, Riley piped up, "Can I come with you, Dad?" Aisha, now on a video call with Zora, who was looking after Ryan and Cannon, chose to stay in the car. "I'll wait here," she said, pulling out her phone. "I'll just be a few minutes," Steph assured her, taking Riley's hand as they walked toward the entrance. Inside, the fluorescent lighting created a stark contrast to the golden sunlight outside. As their eyes adjusted, they were met with an unsettling sight near the side door. An employee, his face hardened with frustration, was aggressively trying to remove several homeless individuals. Some were rummaging through trash bins, while others were simply sitting quietly without purchases. The scene drew the attention of nearby customers, creating an uncomfortable tension in the room. Riley tugged on her father's sleeve, her young voice laced with concern. "Dad, why is that man being so mean to those people?" Steph knelt down to meet Riley at eye level, recognizing the opportunity to teach her a valuable lesson. "Well, sweetheart, businesses have rules about who can be in their stores. But you're right. He doesn't have to treat them so harshly." Riley frowned, her brows knitting together as she tried to understand the situation. "But couldn't they be nicer about it?" Riley pressed, her voice tinged with both confusion and empathy. Steph nodded thoughtfully, carefully choosing his words. "It's a complicated situation, Riley. Businesses have their rules, but that doesn't mean people can't be treated with kindness and respect, no matter what the situation is." As they moved closer to the counter, Riley suddenly tugged on her dad's arm. "Dad, look. It's the man from earlier." Steph followed her gaze, and, sure enough, the homeless man they had helped in the drive-thru was now finishing up his order. A sense of quiet pride warmed Steph's chest as he observed the man using the money to buy food instead of something else. "See, Riley," Steph said softly, leaning closer to his daughter. "This is why it's important to help others when we can. We don't always know their stories or what they might be going through." Riley nodded, her young face unusually serious as she absorbed her father's words. While waiting for their turn at the counter, Steph continued, sharing a gentle lesson. "It's important to be wise about how we help others," he explained. "But it's just as important not to judge too quickly. Sometimes, if we're too critical, we might stop ourselves from helping at all." Riley furrowed her brow, clearly deep in thought. "So, we should try to help even if we're not completely sure it'll work out?" Steph smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "Exactly. It's about having the intention to do good, even in small ways, while also being thoughtful. You'll understand it more as you grow." He brushed a hand through her hair, his smile reassuring. Riley's eyes drifted back to the elderly man. "Dad, can we say hi to him?" Steph paused for a moment before nodding. "Let's order our food first, then we can see if he'd like some company, okay?" With that, Steph and Riley approached the counter, ready to place their order. The cashier, a young woman with a warm smile, greeted them cheerfully. "What can I get for you today?" she asked, her expression shifting slightly as she recognized Steph. Riley, excited to speak for herself, piped up, "Can I have chicken nuggets and chips, please?" Steph chuckled and added his order. "And I'll take a cheeseburger with an iced tea." The cashier quickly punched in their order and announced the total. As Steph reached into his pocket for his wallet, a sudden realization hit him. His pockets were empty. "Oh no," he muttered, patting himself down in vain. "I must have left my wallet in the car." The realization felt like a missed game-winning shot. Around them, whispers began rippling through the small crowd as more customers recognized him. The attention made Steph's moment of forgetfulness even more uncomfortable. "Dad, I can go get your wallet from the car," Riley offered eagerly, trying to help. Steph forced a reassuring smile, shaking his head. "It's okay, sweetie. I'll just grab it myself. You stay here, all right?" As Steph took a steadying breath, preparing to head back to the car, the elderly man stepped forward. Still unaware of Steph's fame, He reached out with trembling hands, offering a few worn bills, more than the $10 Steph had given him earlier. "Please," the man said, his voice gravelly but filled with kindness. "Let me help you." The old man interrupted gently, his voice steady despite its roughness. "Please, let me do this. You helped me when I needed it. Allow me to return the favor." Steph paused, recognizing the dignity in allowing someone the chance to give back. He accepted the man's offer with a humble nod. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "Your kindness means a lot. I promise, I'll pay you back." As the cashier processed the payment, Steph handled the moment with deliberate care, aware of how this act of reciprocity might shape Riley's understanding of compassion and preserve the old man's sense of self-worth. The beep of the cash register seemed to punctuate this rare and touching exchange, a reminder that generosity often springs from the most unexpected sources. After receiving the receipt, Steph guided the elderly man away from the counter. At the pickup station, he explained softly, "Sir, you've done something very kind for us. I'm going to step outside to grab my wallet and pay you back. Please, enjoy your meal at the table." Turning to Riley, Steph added, "Would you mind keeping our new friend company while I grab the wallet?" "Of course, Dad," Riley agreed, eager to help. As Steph hurried out, the bright afternoon sun greeted him, a stark contrast to the fluorescent lights inside. Aisha, still engrossed in her video call, barely looked up when Steph opened the car door. "Everything's fine," he called to her. "Just forgot my wallet. Be right back." Back inside the McDonald's, Steph instantly sensed something was wrong. The pickup station was empty, and so was the table where the old man had been seated. Neither Riley nor the elderly man was in sight. His pulse quickened. Scanning the restaurant, he heard a commotion near the side door. Following the noise, Steph's heart sank at the scene unfolding before him. The manager, a stocky man with a perpetual scowl, was shoving the old man toward the exit. Riley stood nearby, her voice sharp with outrage. "Stop it," she cried. "He just paid for our meal. He's allowed to be here." The manager ignored her protests, his grip on the old man firm and unkind. The elderly man looked bewildered and humiliated, clutching a small brown bag of food. Steph stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension like a team captain commanding a huddle. "What's going on here?" The manager turned, his scowl deepening. "This man is trespassing. He doesn't belong here," he snapped. Steph's tone remained calm but firm. "This man is our guest. He has every right to be here." The manager sneered, jabbing a finger in Steph's direction. "I don't care who you think you are. In this restaurant, I make the rules, and I say homeless trash doesn't belong inside." Riley gasped audibly, and Steph's jaw clenched. He inhaled deeply, forcing himself to stay composed. "Standards that include mistreating paying customers?" Steph countered, his voice steady but edged with authority. "He bought his food, just like anyone else, and deserves to be treated with respect." The manager let out a derisive laugh. "Respect? For someone who probably hasn't showered in weeks. Get real. If you're so concerned, you can join him outside." At this, Riley held up the receipt. "Look, this proves he paid for his food." "You can't kick him out," she said, her young voice trembling but resolute. The manager glanced at the receipt with reluctant acknowledgment before waving it off dismissively. "Sure you paid, but I doubt this old beggar had the money for anything." Steph's voice dropped, low and steady. "Is this really the lesson you want to teach? That it's okay to judge and mistreat people based on appearances?" For a moment, doubt flickered across the manager's face, but his expression quickly hardened. "This isn't a shelter," he muttered, doubling down. We have standards. Standards, Steph echoed, his voice rising just enough to capture the attention of the onlookers. What kind of standards justify humiliating someone who's done nothing wrong? This man bought his meal. He's done nothing but sit and eat quietly. If anyone's breaking standards, it's you, with your cruelty and lack of compassion. The tension in the room was palpable. Customers murmured among themselves, their eyes darting between Steph and the manager. Riley stepped closer to her father, her small hand gripping his tightly. "This man has value, just like everyone else in this room," Steph said, his tone unwavering. "If you can't see that, then maybe you're the one who doesn't belong here." Steph pressed the Go Live button, his phone's camera framing him, Riley, and Frank. The late afternoon sun cast a warm glow on the trio, contrasting sharply with the weight of the situation. As viewers began joining the live stream in droves, the comment section filled rapidly with questions and greetings. "Hey everyone," Steph began, his voice calm but filled with purpose. "I want to take a moment to talk about something that just happened. This is Frank Thompson." He gestured to the elderly man seated beside him, "and I need you all to hear his story." Riley sat close to Frank, holding his hand as Steph recounted the events, careful to remain factual while conveying the gravity of the situation. He described how Frank had been mistreated inside the restaurant despite paying for his meal, and how the manager had escalated the situation unnecessarily. As Steph spoke, Frank chimed in, his voice soft but steady. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," he said. "I was just trying to eat my food like anyone else." The comments section erupted in outrage. Words like disgusting behavior and unacceptable scrolled past as thousands tuned in, the viewer count climbing rapidly. Riley added her own thoughts, her youthful innocence making her words even more powerful. "It's not fair," she said, looking directly into the camera. "Mr. Frank was kind to us, and he didn't do anything wrong. Everyone deserves to be treated nicely, no matter what they look like." Steph nodded, his hand resting protectively on Riley's shoulder. "This isn't just about what happened today," he said, his tone resolute. "It's about how we treat people, about empathy, kindness, and standing up against prejudice. We all have a responsibility to do better." The live stream was gaining traction, with media outlets and fans sharing the video in real time. Steph ended with a call to action. "Let's make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. If you see injustice, speak out. And remember, a little kindness can go a long way." He ended the stream and set his phone down, letting out a deep breath. Turning to Frank, he said, "We're not done yet, Mr. Thompson. Let's get you some help." Within minutes, Steph's team and local advocacy groups began reaching out. A nearby shelter offered Frank temporary housing, and a fan of Steph's who worked at a medical clinic volunteered to examine Frank's injuries free of charge. As the parking lot began to clear, Riley hugged Frank tightly. "You're going to be okay now, Mr. Frank." Frank's eyes glistened with tears. "Thank you, Riley. And thank you, Steph. You didn't have to do all this for me, but you did. I'll never forget it." Steph smiled, his arm around Riley. "We all need a little help sometimes, Mr. Thompson, and you reminded me today why it's so important to stand up for what's right." As they watched Frank head toward a van sent by the shelter, Riley looked up at her dad. "We did a good thing today, didn't we, Dad?" Steph knelt to her level, brushing a stray curl from her face. "We did, sweetheart. And you were a big part of it. I'm so proud of you." They stood there for a moment, the sun dipping lower in the sky, casting long shadows but also a golden light, symbolic, perhaps, of the brighter path they had helped carve for Frank and others like him. Steph announced with a steady voice, "We're going to end this live stream now, but I want to thank everyone who joined us." Together, We can make sure that no one is treated this way again. Please, remember Frank's story and help wherever you can." He ended the stream and slid his phone into his pocket, turning his full attention to Frank. "Let's get you somewhere safe, Mr. Thompson," he said, his voice soft but resolute. By now, a crowd had gathered outside the restaurant, some drawn by the live stream and others by word of mouth. Among them were reporters and advocates for homelessness awareness, their cameras and microphones poised. The manager, realizing the gravity of the situation, retreated to the back of the restaurant, his earlier bravado replaced by panic. Steph quickly flagged down one of the advocates. "This is Frank Thompson," he explained. "He's been through enough today. He needs medical attention and a safe place to rest." The advocate, a woman named Maria, nodded immediately. "We'll make sure he gets everything he needs," she said. As Maria and her team helped Frank into their vehicle, Riley hugged him tightly. "You'll be okay now, Mr. Frank," she said with conviction. Frank smiled through tears, his voice thick with gratitude. "You're a remarkable young lady, Riley. Thank you for standing up for me." Steph knelt beside his daughter, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll check in on you soon, Mr. Thompson," he promised. "This isn't goodbye. It's just the start." As the advocate's vehicle pulled away, the crowd outside erupted in applause, their support for Steph, Riley, and Frank palpable. Later that evening, as Steph reviewed the footage from his live stream, he noticed the overwhelming response. Thousands of shares, comments, and messages of support. Several major news outlets had already picked up the story, using it as a catalyst for discussions about homelessness and the systemic biases that perpetuate such treatment. Steph knew that the real work was just beginning, but he felt hopeful. Frank's dignity had been restored, and a larger conversation had been sparked. Sitting with Riley at the dining table, he said, "You know, sweetheart, today you showed me something important. You reminded me that no matter how big or small, every voice matters." Riley beamed. "Does that mean I can stay up late tonight?" Steph laughed, pulling her into a hug. "Nice try, but no. You've got school tomorrow." As Riley bounded off to her room, Steph felt a deep sense of pride. Together they had taken a stand, proving that even in the face of injustice, kindness and courage could pave the way for change. "But it's still a meal, and we'll get you something better soon. You've had a long day." Frank nodded, offering a small smile. "Thank you, Mr. Curry, for everything. I don't know how to repay you." Steph glanced back, his eyes kind. "You don't need to repay me, Mr. Thompson. Everyone deserves kindness. Just promise me one thing. Keep your head up. You've got people who care about you now." The Tesla glided smoothly through the streets of Oakland, heading toward the community sports center. By the time they arrived, the crowd for the charity game was already gathered, a mix of fans, local families, and fellow players. The warm glow of the center's lights spilled out onto the street, a beacon of hope and community. As they pulled into the parking lot, Steph turned to Frank. "How are you feeling? Do you think you can handle the noise and excitement, or would you rather rest somewhere quiet?" Frank straightened his posture, a spark of determination in his eyes. "I'd like to watch the game, if that's all right. It's been a while since I've seen something like this." Riley beamed. "You'll love it, Mr. Frank. Dad's the best at basketball, and I can cheer really loud." With Riley leading the way, the group entered the center. The buzz of the crowd quieted slightly as people noticed Steph and his family. Whispers spread, and soon warm applause broke out, not just for Steph's arrival, but in recognition of the events from earlier in the day, which had already begun circulating online. Steph paused to address the audience briefly, keeping his tone humble and sincere. "Thank you for the support. Today reminded me of the importance of community, of lifting each other up. We have a special guest with us tonight, Mr. Frank Thompson. Let's make him feel welcome." The crowd erupted in cheers, and Frank's face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and gratitude. For the first time in a long while, he felt seen, not as a burden or an outcast, but as a person who mattered. Throughout the game, Frank sat courtside with Riley and Aisha, a cold drink in hand and a blanket draped over his lap to keep him warm. He watched in awe as Steph played with the same grace and determination he'd shown in standing up for Frank earlier that day. The energy of the game, combined with the kindness of strangers, seemed to lift his spirits. At half-time, Steph joined his family, kneeling beside Frank. "How are you holding up?" Frank's eyes glistened. "I've never been treated like this before," he said softly. "You've given me more than I could have imagined in just one day." Steph placed a hand on his shoulder. "And it doesn't end here, Mr. Thompson. We'll make sure you're taken care of. You're part of this community now, and we take care of our own." As the game resumed, the atmosphere in the center buzzed with positivity. Steph's live stream had already begun making waves, prompting discussions among policymakers, community leaders, and activists about homelessness and dignity. For Frank, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one where he wasn't invisible anymore. For Steph and his family, it was a reminder of the power of kindness, the importance of standing up for what's right, and the incredible strength of community. And for everyone who had watched the events unfold, it was an invitation to do better, to treat each other with respect, empathy, and love, no matter the circumstances. To Frank, a reassuring smile on his face. "But I'll be back before the game starts. Riley and Aisha will stay here with you." Frank nodded, his gratitude evident. "Take your time, Mr. Curry. I'm already feeling more at ease than I have in years." As Steph headed to the locker rooms, Riley pulled out a notebook and began doodling, occasionally chatting with Frank about basketball and the game they were about to watch. Aisha, ever the calming presence, ensured Frank had everything he needed and even managed to get him a fresh cup of coffee from the concession stand. The staff member returned with cold compresses, which Aisha gently applied to Frank's bruises. "Thank you," Frank murmured, his voice tinged with emotion. "I've never experienced kindness like this." "You're part of our family now," Aisha said with a warm smile. "And family takes care of each other." The game began with an electric energy that filled the sports center. The crowd cheered as Steph took to the court, his presence commanding attention. Frank watched in awe as Steph played with skill and passion, his movements a testament to years of dedication and hard work. Riley's enthusiastic cheers echoed through the stands, bringing a smile to Frank's face. During halftime, Steph returned to check on Frank, his jersey damp with sweat but his expression full of warmth. "How are you holding up?" he asked. Frank grinned, his earlier fatigue replaced by genuine joy. "This is incredible. I never thought I'd experience something like this again. Thank you, Steph. Truly." Steph crouched beside him, meeting his eyes. "This is just the beginning, Mr. Thompson. We're going to make sure you have everything you need to rebuild your life." As the second half of the game resumed, Steph's mind raced with ideas. He thought about leveraging his platform to create awareness, partnering with local organizations, and even launching initiatives to support individuals like Frank. The events of the day had ignited a new sense of purpose in him. When the game ended and the crowd began to disperse, Steph stood at center court with a microphone, addressing the audience. "Tonight, I want to dedicate this game to someone who reminded me of the power of kindness and resilience. Mr. Frank Thompson, thank you for sharing your story with us and for allowing us to be a part of your journey. This isn't just about basketball. It's about building a stronger, more compassionate community." The crowd erupted in applause, and Frank, seated near the court, was moved to tears. For the first time in years, he felt hope, a flicker of light in what had been a long and dark tunnel. As they left the sports centre that evening, Frank looked at Steph, Riley, and Aisha with newfound determination. "I don't know where this journey will lead, but I'm ready to face it. Thank you for believing in me." Steph placed a hand on his shoulder. "We believe in you because you're worth it, Frank. And together, we'll take it one step at a time." The night sky stretched over Oakland, stars twinkling like promises of a brighter future. And as the Curry family drove home, Frank felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of belonging. As he looked at Frank, this day started with something simple, buying a meal, but it's grown into something bigger. "I don't believe in coincidences, Mr. Thompson. I think we were meant to cross paths today." Frank looked down, visibly moved, but said nothing, letting Steph continue. "I want to help you, not just tonight, but in the long run," Steph said. "You've got so much to offer. Your knowledge, your kindness, your resilience. I know we can work together to turn things around." Frank's voice wavered as he replied, "I don't know what to say, Steph. It's been so long since anyone saw me as more than just my situation." Riley stepped forward, her young voice full of determination. "You're more than that, Mr. Frank. You're awesome. And we're your friends now, so we've got your back." Aisha placed a reassuring hand on Frank's shoulder. "We can't promise to fix everything overnight, but we can promise to stand by you. And we'll figure out the next steps together." Steph nodded, already formulating a plan. "The first step is making sure you're healthy and safe. I know some people who can help with housing and job support. But before we do anything, let's get you a warm meal and a good night's sleep." Frank blinked back tears, overcome with gratitude. "I don't deserve this kindness," he murmured. "You do," Steph said firmly. "Everyone does." As they left the sports centre, the Curry family and Frank walked out together under the stars, their steps lighter despite the weight of the day. Steph knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to take it, one step at a time, with Frank by his side. As they reached the Tesla, Steph opened the door and motioned for Frank to get in. The warm interior felt like a sanctuary compared to the cold streets Frank had known all too well. As he settled into the seat, Steph caught his eye in the rearview mirror, offering a final reassuring smile. "You're not alone in this, Mr. Frank," Riley said from the back seat, her voice full of conviction. "We've got your back. No one should feel invisible or forgotten." Frank looked at her, his gaze softening. "Thank you, Riley. I never thought I'd be sitting in a car like this, with people like you." Steph started the engine, the hum of the Tesla a gentle reminder that the path ahead, though uncertain, was full of potential. As they drove through the quiet streets of Oakland, the weight of the day's events felt lighter with each passing mile. They would take it one step at a time. With Frank now part of their lives, the Currys knew their own understanding of community, kindness, and resilience had grown immeasurably. It wasn't just about helping one person, it was about creating a ripple that could spread through their community, making a real difference in ways big and small. When they reached the apartment, the sense of calm inside the warm space was a stark contrast to the uncertainty Frank had faced for so long. "This is just the beginning," Steph said softly, as they helped Frank inside. "We'll take care of you, make sure you have what you need, and then we'll figure out what comes next." Frank, his voice thick with gratitude, could barely find the words. "I don't know how to thank you. This means everything." "You don't have to thank us," Aisha said, her voice filled with warmth. "We're all in this together." As the door closed behind them, the small family and Frank stood there for a moment, silently acknowledging the new chapter that was unfolding. The evening had started with a simple act of kindness, but it had grown into something far greater, an opportunity to change lives, to stand up for what was right, and to show that even in a world filled with challenges, compassion could make all the difference. For Frank, Steph, and their family, this was just the beginning of a long journey, one of rebuilding, of healing, and of creating a brighter future for everyone. The road ahead might not be easy, but they knew they would face it together, bound by a shared sense of hope and a commitment to making the world a better place for all.